The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, aka the Jeddah Corniche Circuit, is a relatively new addition to the Formula One calendar, with its inaugural race taking place in 2021. This fast and free-flowing circuit runs along the Red Sea coast and is known for being one of the longest and fastest circuits on the calendar. It contains several long straights and sweeping corners, which require precise handling and a high level of skill from the drivers. It also features many challenging braking zones and tight corners, which provide many opportunities for overtaking. In 2021, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Valtteri Bottas all saw success on the track as they finished on the podium. Overall, the Jeddah Corniche Circuit is known for being very demanding, yet a very technical track that's going to not only test the limits of the drivers, but their cars as well. Compared to Bahrain last week, Saudi has much longer sweeping corners compared to Bahrain's shorter, tighter corners, which in turn will differ the strain on the front versus the rear tires of the cars. This will give teams that may have struggled in Bahrain a different look, and some teams that might have had success the need to make other adjustments. Let's see how the race goes. Hey guys, hope all is going well. It's been about a couple week break here in racing, and I've been kind of dreading it a little bit. It's been a little bit of a slow couple weeks, and so I'm really looking forward to tomorrow when we get into the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And so today was really just a lot of practice today and qualifying. So it was really nice to see some cars go around the track and rip some rubber. And so let's talk a little bit about what practice and qualifying look like. So starting off here, traffic was pretty dang crazy in my experience of watching qualifications in the past and practices in the past. There's a lot of cars moving around, people on different strategies, trying to work on different tires, different setups, whatever that may be, right? And so there's a lot of moving parts. My first time really paying attention to the practice sessions with Formula One. As last week I was mainly just looking at the qualifications, but it was quite interesting. It seems like there's a lot of really slow cars that are on the same track as really fast cars. It was almost like an endurance race in which you have different types of cars that are on the same track trying to run a completely different races almost. And so you had some of these bigger teams, Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Red Bull, just flying by some of these smaller teams. And so, of course, that's going to cause some issues when you've got cheetahs on the same track as camels. And so that's kind of the experience I had with practice today. But let's kind of break it down a little bit more in depth. Look like in general, people are struggling with some of the grip, some of the things going on with the front end of the car. The turns are a lot longer and sweepier, as I mentioned in the introduction to Saudi Arabia. So compared to the tight corners that they faced last week in Bahrain, it's definitely going to kind of change some people's setups a little bit and maybe make them make some adjustments. And so after FP1, we had Red Bull, Aston Martin, and Mercedes as kind of our 1 through 6 going on here. Nothing too surprising with first practice one, but kind of getting into FP2 here. Verstappen, continuing where we left off last week, and he just ripped super fast lap, fastest lap of the day. Alonso kind of right behind him, and then we had Perez as well. And so Alonso's kind of squeaking himself in there. And then we had Verstappen starting to have issues with his gearbox. He wasn't feeling well. And then on top of that, now I'm having issues with my gearbox. So that didn't really help. A lot of turn one lockups and a lot of people hitting the curb as well. Bumping along walls, a lot of traffic going on. So a lot of the similar trends I'm seeing. Maybe it's just a Saudi Arabia thing. Maybe it's just practices in general. I feel like there's a lot of kinks. A lot of teams are trying to find out. People are trying to make huge adjustments to find speed. And so in that, there's some driver error that comes into play as well. Bouncing off of that, looked like we had Gasly and Hülkenberg having some really great pace. Specifically wanting to highlight Gasly. I feel like he's really showing very well. Compared to his counterpart, I think he's going to be in the mix, possibly. But we'll talk about that when we get into qualification. And so FP3, Verstappen ripping another insanely fast time. Fastest lap of the weekend. And man, Verstappen's just unstoppable. Nobody's going to touch Red Bull. This is just going to be stupid. Why would we even watch this race? Because we know Verstappen's going to win. And Red Bull's going to win, right? No, we got a couple things coming up. I'll talk about it here. But traffic. People don't freaking communicate. As I mentioned, we got cheetahs racing against camels, and they're ripping by each other. Nobody's communicating where people are at. Spotters aren't maybe doing the best jobs. They're missing their mark a little bit, and drivers are getting pissed. teams are getting pissed. And so people got to communicate better, especially if you're a slower car. Yo, peel off to the side. I know you're trying to work on stuff too, but it's like, it's really going to get somebody hurt. A lot of people catching that turn 2 curb. A lot of them catching the underbelly of the car, sparks flying everywhere. And yeah, they got to be careful with that understeer. And let's continue on here, getting into qualifications. DeVries spinning out to turn 1. Lando Norris bumping the corner. Ouch, that one hits me right in the soul, right? And so that's not good. Whacking into turn 1, kind of ruining his qualifications, unfortunately. Logan Sargent spinning it into turn 23. Didn't hit the wall, though, so good on him. Piastri, amazing drive for a rookie. I believe it's his first time at the track, and so it was pretty cool to see him rip some laps off, and it's kind of questioning a lot of people that are McLaren fans, like, why is Lando not up to par? What's going on? He's having a lot of issues. And then Verstappen kind of had the final KO move here. He was doing really good, and then his gearbox just flubbed up. And so he ended up getting all the way down to 15th, which is crazy, right? He was supposed to be probably pole position here, is what it looked like, and now he's going to P15, which is not what we maybe expected. Leclerc on rails. Homie was fast, right? Going into this weekend, we knew, and we talked about it on social media a little bit. If you're not following me on social media, go ahead and give me a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and also check the YouTube because I do comment on the community page as well. However, we were talking about Leclerc and his penalty. He did get a penalty. He had some changes that they made, and so essentially they had to change some things around with the electrical components of the car, and they could only do that. I'm reading here, only allowed 2 times where they can replace the control circuit, the control unit rather, and apparently they have replaced it 3 times. And so they had to serve a 10-place field position penalty. Excuse me, I didn't know a better way to put that. But I asked you guys on social media, hey, what do you guys think of this? And so I'll put up what people were thinking here. And so a lot of people are like, 10 places, what the heck? That's crazy. That's a lot of places, right? But I think it's going to mix some things up tomorrow. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the starting grid for tomorrow's race. So first off, let's talk about Red Bull. We've got Sergio Perez leading with the pole position, and then his partner, Max Verstappen, not too far behind him. We got him starting off in 15th due to his gearbox issues, and I think even though Max struggled with the gearbox and had to deal with that issue, I think he still has extremely good pace. He had arguably the fastest car in the field. I mean, not really arguably. The first few days of practice and qualifying, he was fast as heck, right? And so I think it's going to be really fun to see him carve through the field tomorrow. And a lot of people are really excited to see him and Charles Leclerc race it out in the middle to the end of the field, which is going to be really cool to see. And then we have Aston Martin. We got Alonso at 2nd, and then we have got Stroll coming in at 5th. I think, again, they're still, exceeding expectations. Fernando Alonso is somebody that a lot of people are super hyped up about, and I am too. I'm excited to see him up there, and hopefully he can compete for a win tomorrow. Then coming in, we have Mercedes. And so coming into this week after Bahrain, I am seeing a lot of frustrated Mercedes fans and a lot of videos like, Mercedes is done, Mercedes, they're slow, they don't have the pace this year, let's just focus on next year, Red Bull's got it, man, there's no way we're going to catch them. And so a lot of people just went in like full panic mode. And, honestly, like they're still in the mix, and I understand the reason why you may panic. You're several seconds behind, and Bahrain was kind of a joke. You really weren't in the mix, and so I can see their complaints, but hopefully they can compete a little bit better this week. Next, coming in 4th, we have Sainz and we have Leclerc. And I mentioned Leclerc a little bit before, but he's serving that 10-place grid penalty due to his electrical replacement in his car. And so he would have been 2nd place if it weren't for this penalty. So again, I think he is on rails. He's got a fast car. Just because he's serving a penalty doesn't mean he can't compete, possibly for a win. It's possible, right? And so just like I mentioned with Verstappen, I think he's another guy to watch out for. It's going to be super cool seeing them duke it out and super cool seeing them carve through the field and have a bunch of overtakes tomorrow. And again, Ferrari fans are in the same boat as Mercedes. I feel like they're freaking out about last week in Bahrain. I don't know if it's just like in general people just overreact a bunch, or if they actually are that concerned. Like, is it clickbait, or is it like people are really freaking out? I don't know. I didn't. It's just one race, guys. I mean, there's a lot of racing left to go. And then coming in next, we have Ocon and his partner Gasly coming in 6th and 9th. Alpine looking very, very, very good compared to Bahrain. I know Gasly had a pretty good showing there, but I'm impressed to see them really in the mix here. And hopefully, they showed in practice that they can hang around with the big boys. Maybe not the big boys, but, some of the bigger teams here. And hopefully they are in the mix tomorrow. Next, we have Piastri coming in 8th. He's a rookie. I believe it's his first time ever racing here at Jeddah, and he showed extremely well. I can't speak the same for Lando Norris, who's been in the mix in F1 for a couple years now. He had a tough day. And so hopefully he's able to get back up at least in the middle of the pack and show that he's, I don't want to say worth keeping around, but show that, it was just a mistake, and that, that mistakes happen, and that he really is a true person that can be up there in the mix. Next, we've got Haas. I think Hülkenberg looked pretty good. I feel like he was in the mix during practice and qualies, but I don't think they're necessarily true contenders for tomorrow, him and Magnussen. And the other teams are just kind of filling in. I don't see them really in the mix at all. Same news as last week, right? They need to make major adjustments to their cars if they're going to want to compete. And so before I send you off to race day, I want to give you my prediction on what I think is going to happen come tomorrow. And so we've got Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, and George Russell leading the pack come tomorrow. However, there are some hungry dogs in the middle to the end of the pack. We've got Charles Leclerc and we have Max Verstappen. They both have insanely good cars, and they are meant to be in the front of the field. And so I can see them climbing up, possibly having a top 3 finish. They both have great rides, right? So my official prediction is this. I don't think Mercedes has the outright pace. They haven't really looked that great. I don't think it's super panic mode, but I just don't think I see them hanging around towards the end of the race, right? I have been really impressed with Aston Martin. I think Lance has looked very good, very, very underrated. I know a lot of people agree with me. And then Fernando Alonso is just the super seasoned vet that I think deserves to be up there and is extremely skilled and knows what he needs to do to get to the top. When it comes to Sergio Perez, I don't know if he's going to hang on to first. I could see something possibly happening, maybe a mistake, maybe some sort of issue with the car, and him falling back a spot or two, or maybe further back. My bold prediction is going to be this. Maybe it's not so bold. He's in 2nd place. I think Fernando Alonso is going to reign 1st place. I think Sergio Perez will probably find himself in, we'll say 2nd or 3rd place, and then we'll say 2nd, and then I'll say 3rd place. I'm going to make a very bold prediction. I think Max Verstappen finishes on the podium and has a magical comeback and has a great points race and finishes 3rd. And hopefully I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong. And but I hope I'm actually hope I'm kind of right. I want to see Alonso holding that trophy. But I'll see you guys tomorrow, and let's see how the race goes. Good morning, friends. It is race day. I am super excited. I am repping this super cool St. Petersburg shirt that my friend got me a couple weeks ago when he was at the race in Florida. The backside's cooler, but it's hard to get a view of it. You'll probably see it later. But speaking of Noah, he is coming over to watch the race with me. So that'll be a lot of fun, be accompanied by somebody. And yeah, let's get into the race. So it looks like Alonso's got good pace, kind of keeping up with Perez generally. However, it's frustrating because he has to serve a 5-second penalty at some point here. And it looked like over the radio they're still having him on the one-stop strategy, but it's going to put him back quite a bit. So hopefully he can claw his way back up to the front. I feel like the curse for McLaren has carried over from last week. Piastri and Norris finding themselves both out of position early in the race, having to go into the pits. It's very, very frustrating. And I think you guys could probably blame me. I don't know. It'll be a running gag, I guess, but hopefully they can get back up in the field.
Hey Ryan, how's McLaren doing?
Sleep. Done. No.
Yeah, it's not like any car where like you screw up your car. 9. Go, go, go! 5-4. Come on.
Saudi Arabia is in the books. Let's go ahead and break down my thoughts on the race. So the start of the race, really that opening lap, we had Fernando Alonso get a pretty good jump off the start and pass Sergio Perez. Though he was not in his box completely, there was a little gap. He was a little bit too far to his left, and thus he had to serve a 5-second penalty, which I'm going to get into that in a whole separate little column here. But he did make a pass early on, but he is going to have to work his way back. I'll talk about that later. Regarding other people, one of the big events that happened on the opening lap right at the start, we had Piastri getting into Ocon, and that caused quite a few issues here. It brought Piastri to the back of the field because his front end was damaged from that contact, but not only did it hurt him, but it also hurt his teammate in Lando Norris. And that debris coming off of that contact hit his teammate, and then Lando Norris had to go into the pits and get his front end of his car looked at and replaced. And so very early on, we had the McLaren cars in the back of the field, and for me being a new formed McLaren fan, I'm a little bit discouraged. The last couple weeks have not gone great. As I mentioned while I was watching the race, it's a little bit disappointing, but hopefully they can make some adjustments coming up here. When I looked at the tires of this race, a lot of people were starting off with the mediums and finding a lot of success with those, and then later on going to the harder tires. But let's go ahead and break down a little bit more of the middle chunk of the race and one of the main events that happened then. So this race is well known to be a one-stop race, and so that people were trying to start on the medium tires, and then a lot of the leaders were going to harder tires to finish the race, and really trying to just manage the tires to finish the race. And so really it would just require 2 stints. And so first to pit was Lance Stroll, and then coming after him was one after another. But in the middle of that pit sequence, and a lot of people coming into the pits after Lance came back out, his crew told him to pull over, and it looked like there was some smoke that came out of the back of his car. I assume it's some sort of engine issue, and so he had to pull off to the side, and he found a little crevice to peek through, and everything seemed like it'd be fine. And all of a sudden, they went ahead and threw a yellow. And I was like, okay, why are they throwing a yellow? And they said the back of his car was on the track. I felt as though he was off the track. Either way, this was different than the yellow from last week or 2 weeks ago when Leclerc had an electrical issue. And this yellow was different because it was just a normal safety car yellow and not a virtual safety car. So instead of them keeping every driver at a certain percentage of their speed, they instead do kind of like a rolling start, very similar to IndyCar and NASCAR when they do restarts. And so I found that to be a little bit refreshing. And so they actually got the field kind of piled back up, and they were able to make a restart. But this did change some strategy, brought some people into the pits. Some people that didn't pit initially kind of got a quote-unquote free pit in that they were able to kind of cycle in under yellow instead. But this was just something different that happened, and I found it very informational on how they take care of yellows that aren't virtual yellows. But next, let's get into another topic here, discussing some of the early climbers of the race. And so though Verstappen and Leclerc found themselves pretty far back in the field, as I mentioned in kind of my pre-race analysis, I really thought they'd be climbing up and it'd be really fun to watch. Unfortunately, I didn't find it all that fun to watch. Verstappen has such a much better car than everybody else. Same with Leclerc, that they were just blown right by people. It wasn't even like people were really fighting for positions. At least in Bahrain, we saw Lewis Hamilton fending off Fernando Alonso, Sainz fending off Fernando Alonso, and there was a lot more fight and defending going on. But I felt like as soon as Verstappen got up to people were like, okay, I'm out of the way, I'm just going to move, to the side. They didn't necessarily come to the side, but just he was so much faster, it wasn't even really a challenge for him at all. And so him climbing all the way up to finish second, it was like, okay, I kind of expected that. I honestly was a little disappointed with Charles Leclerc. I thought that he could have probably climbed up a little bit more. He technically qualified P2, and so I figured that he'd be more in the mix there. I didn't have him in my top 3, but I thought he would do a little bit better than where he ended up. And so the next topic is going to be something known as DRS, or drag reduction system. And so this is something that when I shared my concern about our last segment regarding some of these really fast cars passing the slower cars, Noah mentioned to me something about the DRS. And so this is they made a lot of regulation changes in the past year, and I did study that in my first episode. However, one thing they didn't really address was the DRS. And so what happens is there are these certain zones on the track in which this DRS, or drag reduction system, can be used. And so on the rear end of the car, there's this flap that will be able to be turned in these certain zones. And very similar to push to pass in IndyCar, they can use this DRS to gain speed and to be able to perform passes, especially on straightaways. This is very advantageous, as you can just blow by some of your competitors by using this. And so after talking to Noah, we had some displeasure about maybe how this is used, and also how if they maybe were to manage this better, it might promote racing that is a little bit closer and actual racing. You know what I'm saying? So it might bring the field a little closer together if they didn't have as much free reign on this DRS as they do. So maybe this is something they can look at in the future, so it's not creating as much uncompetitive racing per se. Next, I'm just going to have a whole little segment on radio drama. I didn't catch much of this last week. I know there was a couple funny things that were said at Bahrain. However, I felt like in this race, there was a lot of banter between driver and strategist. And so I saw, firstly, was some banter with Leclerc and his strategist, as they didn't really communicate well with what was going on in the pit sequencing, and he didn't even know that Hamilton was in the pits, and he's like, I could have pushed harder. What the heck, man? Why didn't you tell me this? And so honestly, I'm going to give props to you guys as F1 fans. You guys have some really funny memes, be frank with you. I'm going to have I'll have it up here somewhere, Leclerc's kind of banter with his strategist, but I found it pretty comical. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, there was a lot of drama with Red Bull. I felt like they were telling Sergio Perez to almost slow down, and he's like, what are you talking about? Like, what pace am I trying to meet? And they're giving him a number, and then they're like, okay, what pace is Max at? And then they're basically saying, yeah, Sergio, slow down, let Max win, in a way, okay? They just didn't have his marks at the same level as Max's, and so Max even asked them, hey, do I have the fastest lap? What do I need to hit? You know, trying to ask about that, and they're like, don't worry about that. We're just worried about racing, whatever. And Max is like, well, that concerns me. I mean, I want the extra points, right? Because we know that you do get extra points when you get the fastest lap of the race. And so they didn't even communicate that with Max, and he was kind of like, what's going on?
What's the fastest lap? We are not concerned about that at the moment, Max. Yeah, but I am.
Yeah. Right, Kevin.
So there's kind of some weirdness going on in Red Bull's radio specifically. And then, lo and behold, Max did end up getting the fastest lap of the race. And props to him coming from 15th. But I found the banter to be quite funny. Something else regarding the radios that I found to be quite funny that I would like to mention, and I found funniest out of all these interactions, was the interaction with Verstappen and his team when Verstappen had some downshifting issues, and he was feeling massive vibrations, and he's like, yo, I'm having these issues, can you guys look into it? And they're like, oh, no, you're fine, everything's good on your end. And he's like, how is everything fine? I'm feeling all these things. And they're like, oh, no, don't worry about it. They're like gaslighting him, like gaslighting at the finest, right? And they were just like, no, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. He's like, well, not everything's fine because I'm feeling all these vibrations. And they're like, oh, we're happy with where we're at. And he's like, what the heck, right? And I don't think it ever got resolved. And I think he dealt with that issue throughout the race. But I found it quite comical, the gaslighting that was going on with the team relating to the driver. Definitely thought that was worth mentioning. So I have this meme that I found pretty perfectly fits the scenario in which the dog's like in the room, just fire all around him, and he's like, "It's fine, everything's fine," and that's kind of what Red Bull was doing there. Lastly, let's talk about the drama. It wouldn't be an F1 race without some sort of drama, and so let's mention and let's talk about the whole Alonso thing, the whole penalty thing. Okay, I mentioned how he did get a penalty on the start. He was not in the position he needed to at the start of the race. And so, yeah, he got a 5-second penalty. And very different than other race series that I'm familiar with in IndyCar, when there's a penalty of some sort of nature, they require the driver to give up a certain amount of positions or to serve a drive-through penalty, which will cut out time. And so this is a new topic to me personally. So when they told Fernando Alonso that he had a 5-second penalty, I asked Noah, I'm like, hey, is this something that they just have like a drive-through? And he's like, no, a lot of times they do it at the end of the race. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of odd. I don't really like that. And so then about halfway through the race, come to find out, he served his penalty in the garage, not in the garage, in pit lane. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So he's still in third place. And like, a lot of the other drivers didn't even know he served his penalty. Like, I would figure race control would be like, hey, officially send it out to everybody. He just served his penalty, right? So Lewis Hamilton's like, okay, he still needs to serve his penalty, right? And they're like, no, he served it. And then a little bit later, they're like, oh, no, he didn't serve it. And I'm like, wait a second. What do you mean he didn't serve it, right? And so then later on, come to find out, there was a little bit of drama here. They were supposed to serve a 5-second penalty, and the rule states, and I'm going to have up here what the FIA sent out to everybody after the race, but allegedly they are not supposed to have any contact with the car while serving a penalty. And so I'm reading here that they did have some contact with the car, specifically with the back of the car. They kind of had a jack that was attached to the car. And so I understand that, okay, maybe they didn't serve the penalty correctly, but how much advantageousness, how much did they advance their car by having that slight touching there? And there was no person touching the car, no person working on the car, right? So that's my main question. I'm like, okay, sure, you're going to have this penalty and that's going to be served. That's fine. But then, okay, let's say it gave him an advantage of 1 second, right? Okay, then just take a second off the end of the time. Why are you adding a 10-second penalty on top of the 5 he already served during the race? My man already celebrated. He had the champagne. He had the trophy. He was on the podium. And then, nope, George Russell's going to come in here and get third place because you have to serve a 10-second penalty and la, 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 la. I'm like, are you serious? Why was this not figured out during the race? That's something that is frustrating to me as a fan. Not only did I have questions on if he even served the penalty during the race, which wasn't communicated properly, and it felt like he was racing against the clock. And he's like, okay, as long as he gets 5 seconds ahead of George Russell, he'll be fine. And he ended up doing that, and it didn't even freaking matter because they gave him a 10-second penalty on top of that. And so that's frustrating to me as a fan because I think the communication was very poor. And even on top of that, think of it this way, right? Why doesn't he just serve the penalty after they work on the car? Why don't they fill up the car, do whatever they got to do, and then let's take our hands off the car and just let it sit for 5 seconds and then go? Or why don't they have some sort of clock that everybody in the world can see in pit lane that shows the time so we know exactly what's going on? And apparently we don't know that. And so if they're going to let the teams take time of their own penalties, then they should have that discrepancy there, I feel like. And not only confusing to me, but confusing to the drivers. Nobody knows the standard, right? It's all different. It differs so much. My boy, Fernando Alonso, celebrated his 100th podium in Formula One, and then we had to renege all of that because of your poor communication with race control or the FIA, whoever's enforcing that. And I see a lot of things on Twitter, a lot of things on social media where there's double standards. I'm going to give some examples over here to my right, but there's double standards in this racing league. In other years, they weren't enforcing these things the same. They were not. It just last year, the year before that. Certain teams get favoritism, it feels like, right? And that's always extremely frustrating when you feel like the officiating is not fair. And it should be fair. If you're going to have a rule, enforce it the same. Don't make it change so willy-nilly. I know there's obviously circumstances are different, but if one driver shouldn't be able to be out of his box in the start of the race, and then a different driver does the same exact thing the year before and it doesn't get enforced. And then now all of a sudden it gets enforced to Alonso. And just there's a lot of examples of that. And so if you're going to have so many stinking regulations and rules, enforce them equally. And then people won't get upset. And then communicate what's going on, and then we'll all understand. We'll all be on the same page, right? And so that definitely needs to be fixed in the future. And I think that'll give a better experience for the drivers and the fans alike. All right, and lastly, let's touch on the results of the race. And so we had Sergio Perez finishing in first place. I honestly was very impressed with his drive. He kept his composure. A lot of things going on behind him. And he came out victorious. Max Verstappen working his way all the way up from 15th. Props to him, right? Next, we have George Russell getting third place on the podium. I was kind of disappointed with Lewis Hamilton a little bit. I find that Lewis Hamilton probably should be above of George Russell in most races, right? I feel like he is a more prestigious driver, at least in my opinion. And so I think he can do better, personally. Next, Fernando Alonso. And then you can look at his teammate in Stroll as well, kind of going by teams here. And I'm kind of disappointed in how Lance Stroll's race finished and how he was not able to finish the race. And I honestly think of him as somebody who can be in the mix at the top and maybe able to compete for a win at some point in time. But it's disappointing because it's something that's not really in his control necessarily, and he seems like a good kid who's come a long way. And so next race, I hope to see him back up there at the top. Next, we have Ferrari. I was really disappointed in Leclerc and how he kind of mixed in. I think he could have done a lot better based on his qualification and how his car was in practice and all. I think he could have been a little bit higher up, and Ferrari fans probably agree with me a little bit as well. Next, we had Ocon. We have Gasly. I think they have shown that they can be in the mix. Alpine's been very good, especially this weekend. They showed very well. I was expecting to see Pierre Gasly up there, but also seeing Ocon up there, I was a little bit surprised and pleasantly surprised. Next, we've got Haas, actually a pretty cool duel that I didn't get time and didn't feel the need to break that a whole segment on, but I felt Yuki versus Haas was a pretty cool little duel we had going on here. We had Yuki leading, and then both Haas cars went ahead and passed Yuki, and then Yuki came back and ended up passing Hülkenberg to kind of squeeze in there in 11th place. Next, we got a couple cars that are just mixing in towards the back, not really anybody who's a big factor. Of course, McLaren may be underperforming in that essence. And honestly, I believe Logan Sargent had some issues towards the end of the race. And then I do recall having Alex Albon having some issues as well. And so that kind of brought them down a little bit. But overall, decent race. I thought Bahrain was a little bit more competitive, a little better, and so I'm hoping to see a better race here in Australia come in a couple weeks. But before I send you guys off, there is one thing that I did do this week to get a little bit more into F1, and so what I did do is I purchased some Formula One trading cards. So stick around as I open up a pack of those.
Hey Ryan, did you see Fernando Alonso got his 100th podium of his career?
Well, actually, after the race, they added on 10 seconds to his time due to a penalty, and he ended up in 4th place. Such a bummer.
That's actually not what I see here on Twitter. I see he got his 100th podium. He's really proud of his team and that he was actually reinstated and back in 3rd place.
What? Let me see this. Did you guys see this? Of course this happens right after I film all my content for you guys. Let's talk about it. So, Fernando Alonso is reinstated back into 3rd place. What do I think of this? This flip-floppy shenanigans is so annoying and so frustrating, right? If I'm Mercedes, if I'm George Russell, if I'm Fernando Alonso, I'm upset, right? They had 30-plus laps to make this decision during the race. They didn't. They had a whole ceremony going on and champagne, whole celebration. And then after that, they decided that's a great time to announce that there's a 10-point penalty for Fernando Alonso and George Russell will take 3rd place instead. And then hours afterwards, they renege this and say, you know what? Just kidding. Aston Martin appealed and, we kind of thought they had some good things to say. So instead, we're going to bump Fernando back to 3rd place and George Russell back to 4th place. I think this is well-deserved from Fernando Alonso. I just think the communication has to be better. The consistency in enforcing rules needs to be better. And it needs to be done in a timely manner. Okay? It shouldn't take this long and it shouldn't be so flippy-floppy. And so hopefully this is a lesson learned from the FIA and from race control in general, and hopefully this isn't an ongoing thing throughout the season. Maybe down the line, George Russell and Fernando Alonso are going to be competing for that third place, second place, maybe even first place spot at the end of the year, race 22, race 23, right? And maybe this is going to have some huge impact, and we'll wait to see. But thanks for tuning in. Now I'm going to send you guys over to the pack opening. So I'm at the trading card game section, and I've been looking, and I like trading cards, and then bam, right here at the bottom, just what I'm looking for. Formula One trading cards. Let's open these up later. All right, so I was able to pick this up at Walmart, and though it is the 2022 version of this set, and I'll be on the lookout for 2023, I still figured, you know what, it's some Formula One collectibles, and though I may not know every driver in this, and maybe some of them no longer race on their given teams, I was thinking, you know what, this would be fun to open for the channel, so I hope you guys enjoy. And I actually really do enjoy trading cards quite a bit, and so I hope you guys enjoy as well, and I'll be on the lookout for the newer sets that come out as well. So let's break into it. Nice little collectible tin here. Turbo Attacks. Honestly, I think this is a card game where you actually play somebody else in it, but I honestly have no idea what that would entail. So some of you guys leave comments, let me know, how the heck do you play this game? Is it like a Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Digimon kind of thing, or what is it, similar, Magic the Gathering or whatever, what's it formatted after? But all right, so we've got Hero, we've got Leclerc, we've got Daniel Ricciardo, we've got Hero, we've got Bottas, Sainz and Leclerc, Lando Norris, got Vettel, very cool, live action, cool. Got a trio of people that I'm not too familiar with, but very cool. Vettel. Team manager, this guy's a G. I do know that. Lance Stroll, our team manager. I do think the foiling, I mean, not foiling, but like the glare is kind of cool they got on it. George Russell, very cool. Fernando Alonso had a great race last race, so very good. George Russell again. Max Verstappen, that's always a good card, right? Got some guys going backwards here. I'll try to speed it up. But a lot of familiar faces, which is good. Sergio Perez, Yuki, Lando Norris again. You know I like Lando Norris. Another McLaren car. Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Hero again. Very cool. Vettel, Lance Stroll, Lewis Hamilton, very cool. Ooh, 2021 F1 car. I do like these car ones. They're just like super clean. Ooh, nice little Mercedes team duo. Fernando Alonso, no longer on that team, but still really cool. Sergio Perez, Pierre Gasly, another F1 car. Like, these are gonna be cool. Ooh, these are shiny ones here coming up. Hold up, what do I do? Okay, I guess I'll just go like this. Okay, this is just a team. So Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Haas. Cool, I got 4 teams. That's pretty sweet. Nicholas Latifi. I'm not sure about who that is, but do see Lance Stroll. Very cool. Got Ocon. We've got Lance Stroll again. We've got Fernando Alonso. Very cool. And then we've got Carlos Sainz. And we do have one more little pack here. It's supposed to be special editions of some sort in here. So let's open this up as well. Let me know if you guys know if these are worth anything. Let me know, or any ones that are highly coveted or rare, because I'm not sure. Ooh, Kevin Magnussen, nice gold one. George Russell, very cool. We've got Esteban Ocon, Nico Hülkenberg, and then Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the card opening, and I'll have to get some of these in sleeves and maybe hang them up somewhere. But yeah, thanks for tuning into this.